The night I passed my 10th grade exams was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. At least that's what everyone at school kept saying. Your family must be proud. You're the first one in your class to score this high. Your parents are going to celebrate tonight, right? I smiled every time someone said those things. Not because they were true, but because it was easier than explaining the truth. My name is Lila, and growing up, I learned something very early about my family. Love was conditional, not cruel in an obvious way, not the kind of thing teachers or neighbors would notice, just small things. The way my younger brother got new clothes every semester while I wore the same jacket for 3 years. The way my parents showed up to every one of his school events, but somehow always had work when it came to mine. The way they talked about him like he was the future of the family. And talked about me like I was temporary. But that night was different. I had passed my exams with one of the highest scores in the entire district. Even the principal called my parents personally to congratulate them. So when my mother told me we were having a family dinner that evening, I allowed myself to believe something I hadn't believed in a long time. Maybe they were proud. The restaurant was small but nice. Warm lights. Soft music playing in the background. My parents sat across from me in a booth, while my brother scrolled through his phone beside them. "Order whatever you want," my father said. I almost laughed. Those words had never come out of his mouth before. But I didn't question it. I ordered something simple. Chicken pasta and a lemonade. For a while the dinner felt normal. My mother asked about my exams. My father nodded when I explained the subjects. Even my brother looked up once and said, "That's cool." It was the closest thing to a celebration we had ever had. And for a brief moment, I felt something warm inside my chest. Maybe things were changing. Maybe success had finally made them see me differently. Halfway through dinner, my father leaned back in his chair and took a sip of his drink. Then he said something that sounded almost like a joke. "You know, it's funny." My mother glanced at him. "What?" He chuckled quietly. 10 years ago, we almost didn't keep her." The words hung in the air for a second. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" My father waved his hand casually, like he was explaining something obvious. "Well, you know how taxes work." My stomach tightened. My mother gave a small, uncomfortable smile. "Your father just means..." But he interrupted her. "No, no," he said, still smiling. "Let's be honest." He looked directly at me. "The only reason we kept you was because of the tax benefits." The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. At first, I thought I had misheard him. "What?" My father shrugged. "When you were born, things were tight financially. Someone told us families get tax credits for having another child." My mother stared at the table. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. "So we figured why not," my father continued. The sentence hit my chest like cold water. "You're joking," I said quietly. But my father didn't laugh. He simply took another sip of his drink. No point hiding it now. The music in the restaurant kept playing softly. Plates clinked somewhere behind me. People were talking at other tables. Normal sounds. But inside our booth, everything felt frozen. "So, you only had me for money?" I asked. My father shrugged again. "Technically, yes." My mother finally spoke, her voice low. "That's not the whole story." But she didn't explain further. My brother looked up for a second and said something that made the moment even worse. Well, at least it worked out. He went back to his phone. I stared at the table in front of me. 10 years of small moments suddenly made sense. The distance, the indifference, the feeling of always being slightly unwanted. It hadn't been my imagination. It had been the truth. My lemonade glass sat untouched beside my plate. The pasta suddenly smelled different. Heavy, unappealing. "You're saying this on the night I passed my exams," I said slowly. My father nodded. "Actually, that's why it's funny." He smiled again. "Looks like the tax investment paid off." Something inside my chest went very quiet. Not anger, not tears, just a strange calm. because in that moment, I realized something important. That dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a reminder of exactly where I stood in my own family. And the strange thing was, they had no idea what that reminder was going to change. For several seconds, no one spoke. The music in the restaurant continued softly in the background. Plates clinked, waiters moved between tables, and people laughed somewhere near the front door. But inside our booth, the air felt heavy. I stared at my father, waiting for him to smile, waiting for him to say it was a joke, waiting for someone to laugh and break the tension. No one did. My father simply picked up his fork and continued eating like nothing unusual had been said. My mother kept her eyes on the table. My brother scrolled through his phone again. That was the moment I understood something very clearly. They weren't joking. I slowly pushed my plate away. "You really mean that?" I said quietly. My father shrugged. "You're taking it too seriously. How else should I take it?" "It was just practical thinking," he replied calmly. "Families make decisions like that all the time." My hands rested in my lap under the table, perfectly still. So my entire life was a financial decision? I asked. My mother finally looked up. "Lila, that's not what your father meant." But her voice lacked conviction. My father leaned back again. "Look, you're doing well in school. Everything worked out fine." "Worked out fine," I repeated softly. My brother finally looked up from his phone. "Why are you being dramatic?" he said. "It's not like they treated you badly." I almost laughed at that, but the sound stayed trapped in my chest, because suddenly I realized something. They truly didn't see anything wrong with what they had said. To them, it was just a fact. A practical explanation. The waiter arrived with the bill. My father paid it without even looking at me. Then everyone stood up. Dinner was over.
Just like that. No congratulations. No celebration.
Just a quiet walk out of the restaurant. The night air outside felt cooler than before. My parents walked ahead toward the car while my brother followed behind them. I stopped near the sidewalk. For a moment I watched them. The people who had raised me. The people who had just explained my existence like it was a tax strategy. My mother noticed I wasn't walking. "Lila," she called. I took a slow breath. Then I walked toward them. The ride home was silent. No one spoke. Streetlights passed one by one through the car windows. When we reached the house, my brother went straight to his room. My parents headed toward the living room. I stood in the hallway. My mother paused. "You should get some rest," she said gently. "Tomorrow is another school day." I nodded, but instead of going to my room, I went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and sat at the table. The same table where I had done homework for years. The same table where I had studied for those exams. The same table where I had imagined one day hearing the words, "We're proud of you." Now those words felt unnecessary, because the truth had already been spoken. And strangely, that truth gave me something unexpected.
Clarity. I didn't cry.
Not that night. Instead, I opened my backpack and pulled out my notebook. Inside were the university brochures I had been collecting quietly for months. Scholarship programs, dorm options, admission deadlines. I had always assumed I would stay close to home, help at the family store, continue living under the same roof. But now that idea felt different. Now it felt unnecessary. For the first time, the future looked wide open. Not comfortable, not easy, but open. From the living room, I heard my father's voice. "She'll get over it." My mother responded quietly. "You shouldn't have said it like that." "Well, it's the truth." Their conversation faded into the background. I closed the notebook slowly, because something had changed inside me during that dinner. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet understanding. Sometimes the moment that hurts the most is also the moment that frees you. And my parents had no idea yet that the words they spoke that night were going to change the direction of my entire life. The next morning, the house looked exactly the same as it always had. Sunlight came through the kitchen window. My mother prepared coffee. My father read the newspaper like nothing unusual had happened the night before. But something inside me had changed. Not in a dramatic way, not with anger or shouting, just quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep inside my mind. I packed my backpack for school and walked into the kitchen. My mother looked up. "You're leaving early?" "I have to meet my counselor," I said. She nodded and returned to her coffee. My father didn't even look up from the newspaper. I walked out the front door, without another word. At school, the hallways buzzed with the usual noise. Lockers slamming, students laughing, teachers calling out instructions. But my mind felt calm, almost strangely calm. When I reached the counseling office, the secretary looked surprised to see me so early. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to speak with the college advisor." A few minutes later, I sat across from Ms. Carter, the counselor who had helped many seniors apply to universities.
She smiled when she saw me.
"I heard about your exam scores," she said. "That's impressive." "Thank you. So, what can I help you with?" I opened the notebook I had brought with me. "I want to apply for scholarships." Her smile grew wider. "That's a great idea. With your grades, you'll have strong chances." "I'm hoping to go somewhere far from here," I added. She studied my face carefully. "Do your parents know about this?" I thought about the dinner the night before, about the sentence my father had spoken so casually.
"We only kept you for the tax benefits."
"No," I said honestly, "but they will." Ms. Carter didn't ask further questions. Instead, she pulled out a folder and began explaining the application process. Financial aid, housing options, deadlines. Each word felt like a small step forward. By the time I left her office, something new had settled inside my chest. Not sadness, not resentment, determination. Weeks passed. Applications were sent. Scholarship essays were written late at night while the rest of the house slept. My parents barely noticed. They were busy with their own routines. Sometimes they asked about school. Sometimes they didn't. But I stopped waiting for their approval. Then one afternoon, a large envelope arrived in the mail. I recognized the university logo immediately. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single letter: full academic scholarship. Housing included. For years. For a long moment, I just stood there in the quiet hallway, holding the paper. Everything suddenly felt real. I walked into the living room where my parents sat watching television.
"I got accepted," I said.
My mother looked up. "Accepted where?" I handed her the letter. She read it slowly, then passed it to my father. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the page. "A full scholarship," he said. "Yes." "And you'd be leaving the city?" "Yes." Silence filled the room. Finally, my father looked at me. "That's impressive." It wasn't the warm praise most people imagine hearing from their parents. But it was enough, because I didn't need anything else. 3 months later, I packed my things into 2 suitcases. My brother barely noticed when I left. My mother hugged me quickly at the door. "Take care of yourself," she said. "I will." My father nodded once. "Study hard." I stepped outside and placed the suitcases in the back of the car that was taking me to the airport. As the house disappeared slowly behind me, I thought about that dinner, the sentence my father had spoken so casually. The moment everything changed. For years I had wondered why I always felt different in that house, why their love felt distant. Now I knew the answer, and strangely, knowing the truth had given me something valuable: freedom. Because the night they told me I only existed for tax benefits was the same night I stopped needing their approval, and the future that waited ahead of me was something they had never expected.